Hello boys and girls, good afternoon and welcome to Critical English for grade 7 and 8. Today we're continuing with descriptive writing, and this time we're moving on to describing a place. Now the last time we were here we spoke about descriptive writing and we looked at what it entails and what are some of the things that we would use descriptive writing for. So the last time we said that descriptive writing, so let me just pull up the slide for descriptive writing, and we're going to go back to that. So today it's just going to be me and you, the members of the viewing public, as my students are not here today. So we are looking at descriptive writing, and in the last class we said that descriptive writing has to do with the author's intent to create a vivid image of what he or she is describing in the minds of the reader. And of course, we also said that it relies heavily on the sensory details of what he or she is describing. And in order to be able to do that, we make use of specific techniques. All right, and this type of writing uses vivid language to create the overall effect that the reader is present in the story. So through descriptive writing, it is the type of writing that describes a person, a place, a thing, or an object, or anything that can be communicated through the 5 senses. So last week we looked at describing a person, and we talked about how we go about doing that. And so this week we're going to be talking about describing a place now, or a scene. So what are we doing when we do descriptive writing describing a place or a scene? We are, first of all, we're carefully observing with all our senses. So we take into account what we see, what we hear, what we can smell, what we can touch, and to some extent what we can taste, because sometimes, we may be able to taste something that is as a result of the other senses. We may be able to use the sense of taste. All right, so we want to make sure that we carefully observe with all of our senses, because again, this is a type of writing that takes into account the sensory detail, meaning that when we put it into writing, we are appealing to the reader's senses. And then we want to select the important details. So if we're going to describe a place or a scene, what do we want to include in our description? We cannot, of course, include everything, and so we want to select the important details. And then we want to look at feelings or impressions of the scene that makes the description personal. So what are the things that appeal to you? And so now you put it into words, or we put it into practice. Fourthly, we may wish to create a mood, and this mood that we are looking at could either be a happy or a sad, one of something that is mild, and it's dependent on how we want to create the mood. So how do we want our readers to feel at the end of the discussion, or the end of the reading? So we use words to create that sort of mood. Then we want to use words and striking images that bring the scene alive and make it interesting. So you want to make sure that we utilize those words. So remember, I'm not sure if you were following, but when we started talking on Wednesday, we said that descriptive writing makes use of a lot of descriptive words as well as adjectives. Now, they're not two of the same thing, they're different. So describing words and descriptive words and adjectives. All right, so we have a picture here. Now we want to describe this scene. So what are some of the things that are appealing to you as viewers? And you can type it in and you can let us know. So if you were to describe this scene, what would be some of the things that you would say? And because we have this scene, sometimes what we want to do, we want to decide where we're going to describe it from. So we can start from one side, go across, or we can start from the background, coming back into the front. So there are many ways in which techniques in which we can utilize to describe this scene. All right. So how would you describe this scene? And you can put it in the comments, and I'll be sure to check the comments when I'm done to see how you would go about describing this scene. All right. So I'll give you some time to think about that. And then of course I'm going to go to my description. All right. So it says, read this description of a scene in early December. So the scene that we've just looked at has to do with early December. And let's see if the passage that we have goes into or takes into account what we are reading, what we saw, sorry. Even though it was clear December, my apologies, I'll go that back. Even though it was early December, the sharp light of a cold spell lay on the hills. Trees in distant slopes were etched whole and distinct in the dry, cool air. Already there is an underlying hint of gold on the grassy side of the other hills that spoke of the long, rainless weeks ahead, when only heavy dewfall would come to moisten the earth. Overhanging trees, deep patches of shadows on the road. It seemed to sprat the light, and shade was never so clear-cut, so finely, sharply balanced one against the other, as in the cool glow of the December morning. Around the doors and fences of the houses, the poinsettias were showing blood red, and there were billowing, foaming masses of white Christmas bush. Euphoria, Sprat's mother called it, in some of the large gardens. But most of the Sprat loved the scent of the wild grasses that grew in the hills. What exactly they were, he did not know, but he just knew where the smell began. About 4 miles from the straggling village of Gordontown, and about 2,000 feet up. As they went higher and higher onto the steep, winding road, the sweet, warm smell grew stronger and stronger, and when at last they came to one of the many bridle tracks off into the great peaks and the shoulders of the mountain, the smell was about them as they walked on the springing grass. And this is taken from Sprat Morgans by James DeCosta. All right, so we've just read. Can you identify from the reading any part of the reading that appeals to any of the senses? Are you able to do that? And you can go ahead and of course type it into the chat below. And then I'm going to show you what I came up with. Good. So let's observe the following. And what are we observing? The writer's use of appropriate words to create the atmosphere of the scene. So the first thing we want to look at is the writer's use of appropriate words to create the atmosphere of the scene. And can you think of, so I'll change the slide back to the picture, and can you think of any of the words that help to create the atmosphere that we would have seen in the passage? Yes, so let's go to the examples. So when we look at the clear, sharp light of a cold spell lay on the hills, these are creating a certain atmosphere. In the dry, cool air, it's telling us that, you know, that the place is dry. It's not wet, all right? In fact, there are mentions that says in the rainless, looking at it, in rainless weeks to come. And then glow of the cool glow of the December morning. So the atmosphere in the passage seems to be something that this December morning that they're describing is cool, and it is not very hot, and it's in contrast to what we are experiencing today. Because if you've been paying attention to the weather, the temperature or the atmosphere currently, you notice that it's quite hot. One of the things that I enjoy most about my job is being in the office because of the AC. When you have to step out, you're stepping out into a totally different atmosphere and environment. The next thing we want to look at is the appeal the writer makes to the sense of sight. So can you identify anything in the passage, and let's go back through the passage, that may tell us about the sense of sight? Of course, we're skimming through. Is there anything that you can see that speaks to the sense of sight? Anywhere, anything that you can see, so that if you were to picture and if you were to paint this this passage, paint sort of like a painting for this passage, what would it be? What would we see as readers in your painting, in your work? All right, so I'm going through, and then of course I want to go back to my examples in what my examples that I've identified. So, of course, an underlining hint of gold on the grassy side of the other hills. So, we talk about underlying hint of gold, grassy. We know that it seems to be what? Green, something that is green. We have a lot of grass, or it can be hint of gold in the sense that the grass could also be brown. And then you have overhanging trees. So overhanging trees, of course, are these trees that comes over, all right? And then the poinsettias were showing blood red, and they were billowing, foaming masses of white Christmas bush. So all of these here appeal to our sense of sight, right? These are things that we can see. So if we were to picture it, we are able to paint a picture as a result of these descriptions because of how detailed they are. And then the next thing we want to look at, the appeal to the sense of smell. And again, if you were to go through the passage, would you be able to identify anything that appeals to our sense of so let me go slowly. Even though it was early December, the clear sharp light of a coal spell lay on the hills. Trees on distant slopes were edged whole and distinct in the dry cool air. Already there was an underlying hint of gold on the grassy side of the other hills that spoke of the long rainless week ahead, when only heavy dewfall would come to moisten the earth. Overhanging trees, deep patches of shadows on the road. It seemed to spread the light, and shades were never so clear cut, so finely, sharply balanced one against the other as in the cool glow of the December morning. So nothing in this paragraph appeals to our sense of We're looking at the sense of smell, yes? So nothing here appeals to our sense of smell. So let's see the next paragraph and see if we find anything that appeals to our sense of smell. So let's go. Around the doors and fences of the houses, the poisontillas were showing blood red, and there were billowing, foaming masses of white Christmas bush. Euphoria, Sprat's mother called it, in some of the larger gardens. But most of all, Sprat loved the scent. So is there something that we can smell? Of course, the scent of the wild grasses that grew in the hills. What exactly they were, he did not know, but he knew just where the smell began, about 4 miles from the straggling village of Gordontown. So in this paragraph, we are seeing the writer appealing to the reader's sense of smell. All right? As they went higher and higher onto the steep, winding road, the sweet, warm smell grew stronger and stronger, and when at last they came to one of the many braided tracks off into the great peaks and shoulders of the mountain, the smell was about them as they walk onto the springland. So through the use of senses, we have the sense of smell. We are able to sort of move into the story to be able to understand, or to be able to understand how to describe this place. So you can smell, and in this case, the writer wants the reader to do what? To smell. So let's look here, and we have, of course, the examples. Sprat loved the scent of the wild grasses that grew in the hills. The sweet, warm smell grew stronger and stronger. The smell was about them as they walk on the springing grass. So the writer, through his use of the above devices, gives a vivid and interesting picture of the scene. This description is lively because of the details the writer uses. So when we are describing a place, we've got to ensure that we make use of details that appeal to the reader's senses. So when we're making sure, so let's go back to the picture and let's talk about the picture. Is there anything in the picture? So we see, of course, the overhanging trees. We see the poisontillas. We see the hills, right? And when we look to the background here, this could very well be the gold grass that they're talking about, the brown grass in the background. All right. So what have we done? So today we've begin looking at describe. We are continuing, of course, the descriptive writing. We're continuing the descriptive writing, and today we're looking at describing a scene. And unlike describing a person, right, where we look for physical appearance, we look for habits, behaviors, and personality traits, right? In describing a place, we're paying attention to what? We're observing carefully with all of our senses because we want to record. So if we were to describe this studio, what would we say? We would utilize, of course, the sense of sight, because there's a whole lot of things for us to be able to see. And it's probably a little bit different from what I have, the view that I have in the studio, as against what you're seeing, because of course it's a green room for me, given that I'm sitting in it. But it might be very, very, very different for you, the viewing public. In the sense that if I'm to describe this room, I'll talk about the green walls, and then I'll talk about the curtains that I am seeing, the burgundy. So like I said, it's going to be a totally different description from the one that you that you're seeing. So we have the purple curtains joining the walls, or hanging from the walls. And then of course we have the big flashes, the, what do you call these things? The camera people will probably should be able to help me. And of course we have the overhead lights, because in order to be able to create the atmosphere that we need, we of course will need proper lighting. And kudos to the guys in the studio, we have proper lighting so as to give us the atmosphere that we need. And of course we have the cameras, we have the setting table, there's a large television that I get to look at as the presentation is made, so I can look from the computer or I can look at the television. Of course there is an AC. So what I'm doing, what am I using? I'm using my sense of sight to be able to give you a detailed account. Now what do I hear? Because it's an enclosed space, you don't necessarily hear a lot, because of course the acoustics has to be cornered out properly so that you can get a good sound, so that you don't have what you call, so you don't hear the cars as they pass by. All right, so the atmosphere, all of the senses. So there are times where you will not be able to use all of the senses, but there are times where there's a predominant sense that your description will appeal to when we are looking at the place. So you've got to observe, of course, carefully your details and then select the important details. So because I'm using predominantly the sense of sight, everything becomes relevant in for this instance in my description, because that will help to give my description body. And then feelings and impression of the scene make the description personal. So because what do I want my readers or my viewers to feel? I want them to get a sense of what I'm experiencing in the studio. But perhaps your experience will be different. Of course, your experience, not perhaps, your experience will be different from mine because of what is visual to me. And that is different from what you are seeing. And then, of course, I want to create a happy mood, because I'm always happy, very happy when I have to come to the studio. Today, though, I may be in a very sad mood because I'm only interacting today with the members of the public. And so I miss my kids because they're not here to keep me entertained. They really, really keep me entertained. I've grown to love them very much. Usually you have Alia and Shamar, and sometimes Akila and the others. So yes, so if I were to describe the studio today, I would sort of describe it to promote or to send off a very sad mood, because it's just me alone in the studio. And finally, of course, your use of words and striking image will bring the scene alive and make it more interesting. So today we've looked at plays, and we continue to do our descriptive writing. We continue, and what is common in what we see in both plays and describing a person is that both are using what? In both types of description, we have got to make use of our senses. All right, and that plays a key or critical role in describing in doing a descriptive piece. All right, so that's all the time that we have got for today, and I am going to stop there. And what you can do for me as viewing members of the public is that I'm going to, of course, reread here so that I can leave you with a very good descriptive writing, and then we're going to close. So even though it was early December, the sharp light of a cold spell lay on the hills. Trees on distant slopes were etched whole and distinct into the dry, cool air. Already there was an underlying hint of gold on the grassy side of the other hills that spoke of the long, rainless weeks ahead, when only heavy dewfall would come to moisten the earth. Overhanging trees, deep patches of shadow on the road. It seemed to spread the light and shade were never so clear-cut, so finely, sharply balanced one against the other as in the cool glow of the December morning. Around the doors and fences of the houses, the poinsettias were showing blood red, and they were billowing, foaming masses of white Christmas bush. Euphoria, Sprat's mother called it, in some of the larger gardens. But most of all, Sprat loved the scents of the wild grasses that grew in the hills. What exactly they were, he did not know. He just knew where the smell began, about 4 miles from the straggling village of Gordontown and about 2,000 feet up. As they went higher and higher onto the steep, winding road, the sweet, warm smell grew stronger and stronger when at last they came to one of the many bridle tracks off into the great peaks and shoulder of the mountains. The smell was about them as they walked on the springing grass. And this is taken from Sprat Morrison by Jean de Castor. So today we've continued to look at descriptive writing, and we've looked at how to go about describing a place or a scene. And we want to make sure that we remember that descriptive writing is a type of writing that makes use of the sensory details, or it appeals to our senses. And that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, boys and girls. There will be no math class today, but we will see you on Wednesday.